Lucretia. This production is a contemporary reading of The Rape of Lucretia, with theatrical construction that engages with the formality and brutality of the subject matter. The theatrical language is dual, at times rigorously illustrating the actions of the text, and at other times bending toward an image-based, symbolic interpretation of the events. Now I'll hand it over to Marcus Shields.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you sticking around. I know it's almost time for dinner, and we won't be offended if you start licking the back of your hands to gather the salt content or something like that. But we appreciate that your energy, and we thank you, Stephanie. We also like to thank Opera America and the Robert L.B. Tobin Theatre Arts Fund for their generous support of this production. Claire Gorel for all her help along the way in this grant process. And of course, the amazing designer and producer, Julia Newlin-Murat, for her guidance and mentorship. My name is Marcus Shields, and I am the director of this production concept of Benjamin Britten and Ronald Duncan's The Rape of Lucretia. Joining me on stage is the lovely and talented Ryan Howell, who is responsible both for the scenography and for the costume design of this production. In absentia is Oliver Littleton, our lighting designer, who, though here with us in spirit, is physically in Orlando, Florida, on contract with Disney. Ryan, Oliver, and I have been thinking about this piece for a long time, amongst ourselves, and indeed even prior to the opportunity of this grant. As theater makers who work specifically and intentionally within the realm of classical music, we are deeply engaged in the question of how the visual form of theater connects and dialogues with the complexity and sophistication of Benjamin Britten's music and Duncan's libretto. Essentially, this question of how does theater help you, the audience, hear the music? Britten, of course, is a British composer working in the 20th century who, through the exploration of the ancient, found a compositional voice that embraced the experimentation of modernism while remaining faithful to lyricism and vocalism. This music and text, which is at once so crystalline and architectural, renders the narrative of the rape and suicide of Lucretia through the observational framing device of two onlookers, the male and the female chorus. It illustrates and comments on the nature of sexual violence, power dynamics, and the culpability of the society surrounding these characters in propagating said dynamics and excusing the human violence that lies at the core of this story. Rape of Lucretia premiered in 1946, just over the horizon line of World War II. It relays events that took place in antiquity and has been interpreted in multiple ways in the intervening span of time. Today, we return to this piece interested in how the formal components of the music and the narrative itself help us to realize something deeper about sexual violence and the role that we as onlookers play in the meaning of such events. As a starting point, thank you. As a starting point, we look to the work of 6 visual artists working across various media and time periods. They are Romeo Castellucci, an Italian theater artist who works with images of brutality at the center of his theater. Yayoi Kusama, a Japanese installation artist whose work, Narcissus Garden, pictured here, was a major visual inspiration for our set. Hans van Aachen, a Mannerist painter who rendered the motif of this event at the beginning of the 17th century in oil. Anne Imhoff, a German performance artist whose work considers the relationship between audience and performer, observed and observer. And the Worcester Group, a theater group led by Liz Lecomte that is constantly considering and reconsidering the nature of theatricality and the formal constraints of storytelling. And of course, Michelangelo, who placed the body at the center of his work.
In the creation of this space, we wanted a space stripped of any ornament, within which all elements serve a functional purpose and evoke a space of consideration and contemplation. Cathedral, laboratory, museum, non-space, white box, all words that help understand that the only purpose of the room itself is to contain the events of the narrative. For our scenic language, we opted for a minimalist constraint. We used only the room itself, 2 rows of benches, 2 downstage flower beds with dirt and flowers, a series of vertically articulating chrome orbs, and a movable glass box.
As you will see in the visual progression later, the space moves from clean, almost antiseptic, to utterly destroyed, as if to comment that these sterilized spaces within which we reactivate such violence are fragile, temporary, and illusory. Each element serves a functional purpose, a narrative purpose, and an allegorical purpose. As curated objects, they suggest a sense of atonality, dissonance, and lack of balance. They are a sickly curated exhibition. Continuing our dialogue with cross-disciplinary art makers, we approached the clothing design in this piece through a contained set of current designers who have, in their careers, redefined the nature of high fashion. In thematic resonance with the functional nature of clothing within our theatrical vocabulary, these designers embody ideas of proportion, balance, utility, luxury, shape, and class.
Our palette is restrained, again to further remove a level of distraction and unify a visual idea. Within this shared austerity for the function of storytelling, the clothing articulates two groups of people which we are to understand as separate: those observing, the male and female chorus, and every other character in the drama. Within each distinct group, characters are articulated through the structure and texture of their garments. Lucretia wears a cream dress, modestly proportioned and tilted on its axis. There is both an acknowledgement of form and elegance paired with a confined and covered look.
Tarquinius, the aggressor of this story, blends the world of structured and unstructured, representing a casual sense of privilege, a juxtaposition of the high and low, an Hermes coat paired with a Hollister sweatshirt.
The male and female chorus both take the palette of the box, and in a sense act as the visual continuation of the space itself, sometimes blending against the wall as they allow the action to unfold. There is a robed, almost priestly quality to the uniform, acknowledging the Christian association. Junius, the instigator of the story, is less relaxed in his choice of uniform. There is something intellectual, scheming, compartmental about this dress that reflects his role in the narrative.
Calatinus sits between the two men, wearing a shelled jacket protected within his own body. It's still active.
Lucia, a handmaid of Lucretia, wears a suit. This garment, also conservative, continues the notion that the women, in opposition to the men, operate in a constrained silhouette, not necessarily gendered, yet bound and structured in a different way than the men.
Bianca, again, continues this sense of edge and structure, formal yet flowing. Contemporary fashion, stemming especially from the visual work of Rei Kawakubo, sought to break through the established ideas about luxury and elegance, and especially the hierarchy of tailoring, seeking instead to reimagine the human body in its own vision. The clothing tilted off the axis of the spine, embraced ugliness as an aesthetic tenant, and opened up an entirely new vocabulary for self-expression in the world of fashion. The designers we chose represented by the fashion houses Rev Simmons, Jill Sander, The Row, Comme des Garçons, continue the thematic lineage of this counter-fashion movement while contributing to the refinement of ideals and the relinquishment of ornament. So a bit about the light in this production. As we said, the space is evocative of observational spaces. 2 points of reference are art galleries and laboratories. While it is true that light functions differently in both spaces, art galleries use light to direct the eye specifically, and laboratory using light to illuminate everything in equal value. There is a shared sense that one shouldn't be actively aware of the light source. In our piece, this is true. The light, diffuse and architectural, will attach to the space and remain connected throughout. As the pristine, immaculate room is slowly destroyed, the light will reflect these changes, illuminating the desecration throughout. The box, which is connected to Lucretia physically and metaphorically, is lit from within, again, directing the eye without distracting from the object. In these reference images, you can see potential shapes that these objects can evoke as light illuminates them and passes through them. And as demonstrated in our renderings, the progression of light to dark. This is the visual progression of our show. The show begins with the box covered, the space pristine and arranged, as if a curatorial staff had been through the evening before. The male and female chorus enter the space along with the other characters, which are always present even when not engaging in the action. The orbs descend, then covering the floor. The male and female chorus regard the objects of their consideration. Narratively, we are in a time of war. The men sit among the orbs, which become the light of the campfire. The men discuss the nature of female sexuality. The women sit along the wall watching. Lucretia enters the box upstage. Lucretia, the wife of Calatinus, appears to be the only faithful spouse. Junius, shamed by his own wife's infidelity, challenges Tarquinius to test Lucretia's fidelity. Tarquinius sets off. While the male chorus sings of the ride of Tarquinius to Lucretia's doorstep, a pathway of orbs begins to rise from the ground, articulating a pathway. The glass box containing Lucretia is moved downstage. Lucia and Bianca remove the cloth covering the glass. Junius and Calatinus step outside the action to observe. Lucretia begins to cover the inside of the glass box with red paint. Tarquinius engages uncomfortably with Lucia, Bianca, and Lucretia, stalking around the glass box. The male and female chorus observe this building tension, but remain distant and passive. All have gone to bed. Only Lucretia and Tarquinius remain in the center. They remain separated by this glass structure. As the tension builds, Tarquinius presses his body to the box, kissing the glass. Lucretia snaps into the awareness of danger and attempts to escape. Tarquinius shatters the glass. Lucretia attempts to seek refuge in the other characters on stage, while Tarquinius slowly moves towards her. All observers are passive. Shards of glass litter the floor. The next morning, Lucia and Bianca tend to the garden. Shards still lay on the ground. Lucretia, devastated by the events of the previous day, destroys her garden, sending dirt and stems across the entirety of the stage. She picks up an orchid and asks for Calatinus. Junius and Calatinus arrive. Lucretia picks up a shard of glass from the floor, admits her shame to Calatinus, and pierces her throat with the glass. At the moment of her death, the space fractures and splinters. A cyc, stretched across the back wall, crumples to the floor, revealing a mirrored surface in which both the theater and the characters are reflected. And slowly, one by one, the orbs, which have dangled like swords of Damocles above the heads of these characters, start to fall from the air, cracking as they hit the ground. As the characters stand around contemplating the ramifications of Lucretia's death, the tempo of the orbs increase. As the male and female chorus begins the epilogue, the space continues to crumble, as if defying their attempt at distance and contextualization. The brutality and tragedy of Lucretia's death seeps into the world of observation as the music finishes. The final orbs drop, plunging the space into darkness. So, running through this, yeah, thank you. We, of course, invite all of you to come down and speak with us one-on-one at our display on the second floor, just outside the elevator bank, but pass it over here.
Are there any pressing questions at the moment? Okay. Yes, please.
Is there a reason why you didn't invite a female perspective into the process?
Well, actually, the reason, I appreciate first the observation. I think it's a fair and very clear critique of this team. This production started as a conversation between Ryan and I, who are roommates, in our evenings, discussing the work that we are seeing in our daily lives. And when we got the opportunity to go for this grant, it became an opportunity to sort of test out some of the ideas of experimental presentation that we were sort of chewing over. And I think both of us view this as something that is congealed to the point of presentation but in no way finished. And were we to be given the opportunity to continue this production and bring it into a physical realized form, the first thing that we would do would be to open up our team to invite a diversity of perspective, both in terms of gender and in terms of race, and not for any optic reason, but because we truly believe that this will deeply improve our work in every way. So thank you. It's something that we, going forward, would like to solve.
Are there any other questions for the team? Okay, thank you so much for sharing this very elegant production. I would like to now welcome our final team to the stage. This team is